There are some houses you notice because they are beautiful. And then there are houses you notice because something about them feels wrong. The house across the street from mine was one of those houses. I lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Portland, Oregon. Most of the homes on our street were modern, well-kept, and surrounded by green lawns, except for one. It was an old two-story house at the end of the block. The paint had faded years ago, the front porch leaned slightly to one side, and the yard had become so overgrown that you could barely see the walkway. Nobody had lived there for as long as anyone in the neighborhood could remember. But every night, something happened. At exactly 2:13 a.m., a light came on in the upstairs bedroom. Not 2:12, not 2:14, always 2:13. My name is Ethan Carter, and for the first few months, I tried to ignore it. I assumed someone owned the house and simply didn't want anyone to know. Then one evening, I asked my neighbor, Mike Reynolds, "Who lives there?" Mike looked at the house for several seconds before answering. "Nobody." "Nobody?" He nodded. "That place has been empty for more than 20 years. I laughed. "Then who's turning the light on?" Mike didn't laugh. "That's the part nobody knows." That answer stayed with me. So one night, I decided to watch the house. I turned off every light in my bedroom and sat beside the window. 2:10 a.m. Nothing. 2:11. Nothing. 2:12. The street was completely silent. Then the clock changed. 2:13. The upstairs window suddenly lit up. I stared at it. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then a shadow appeared behind the curtain. It was the shape of a person. I stood up. The shadow moved closer to the window. Then it stopped, and slowly, it turned toward my house. I grabbed my phone and took a picture. The flash lit up my room. The shadow disappeared. The light went out. I looked at the photo. At first, it looked normal. Then I zoomed in. There were two figures behind the curtain. One was standing near the window. The other was standing farther back. I couldn't explain it. The next morning, I showed the picture to Mike. His face changed the moment he saw it. "Where did you take this?" "Last night." He stared at the screen. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "That's not possible." I asked him why. Mike told me the house had once belonged to a family named Blackwood. Daniel Blackwood, his wife Sarah, and their 8-year-old daughter Emily. One night in 1996, all three disappeared. No bodies, no evidence, nothing. The house was searched by police, but they never found an explanation. Mike's father had known the family. Before they disappeared, Daniel had told him something strange. He claimed someone was walking around inside the house at night, but whenever he checked, the rooms were empty. Mike looked back at the photograph. Then he whispered, "There's one more thing." "What?" The upstairs light started turning on after the family disappeared. That night, I stayed awake again. At 2:13, the light came on, but this time, there was no shadow. Instead, something appeared against the glass. 4 words, written from the inside. "Ethan, don't come here." I stepped away from the window. My phone vibrated. A message had arrived from an unknown number. It contained only one sentence. "You already did." The next morning, I drove to the Ashwood County Library. If I was going to understand what was happening, I needed to know everything about the Blackwood family. I spent nearly 2 hours searching through old newspapers. Then I found the article. October 14th, 1996. The headline read, "Family Disappears from Ashwood Home." The article described Daniel and Sarah Blackwood and their daughter Emily. The police had searched the entire property. They found the family's cars, their clothes, their food still inside the refrigerator. Even Emily's school backpack was sitting beside the front door, but the family was gone. Then I noticed something strange. The article mentioned that the grandfather clock inside the house had stopped at exactly 2:13 a.m. I stared at the number. 2:13. The same time the upstairs light appeared every night. There was another photograph beneath the article. It showed the Blackwood house. I zoomed in. Emily was standing in the upstairs window. My hands went cold. The photograph had been taken 3 days after the family disappeared. I took the newspaper to Mike. He didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, he told me his father had once received a letter from Daniel. The letter had one warning: never enter the house after dark. Naturally, that warning only made me want to know what was inside. That evening, Mike and I crossed the street. The front door was locked, but the lock looked ancient. Mike reached for the handle. The door opened before he touched it. Neither of us spoke. We stepped inside. The air smelled like dust and old wood. Everything looked exactly as it must have looked 20 years earlier. A coat still hung beside the entrance. Old family photographs covered the hallway. And on the wall was a picture of Emily. She was smiling. I walked closer. Something was written on the back. She always heard them first. Mike looked at me. Heard what? Before I could answer, we heard a noise upstairs. A soft step, then another. Someone was walking across the floor. Mike whispered, "Maybe we should leave." But I was already climbing the stairs. At the end of the hallway was Emily's bedroom. Inside, everything had been left untouched. A small bed, a wooden desk, a shelf full of children's books, and a diary. I opened it. Most of the pages were drawings, but the final pages were different. One sentence appeared again and again. "Daddy says there's nobody downstairs." Then, "But I hear someone breathing." Then, "Mommy hears it too." The final page contained only one line. "Daddy went downstairs tonight." Below it was another sentence written in darker ink. "He came back, but he wasn't Daddy anymore." Suddenly, the bedroom door closed behind us. Mike grabbed the handle. It wouldn't open. Then we heard footsteps outside. Slow, heavy, coming closer. The footsteps stopped directly outside the door. A child's voice whispered, "Ethan?" I looked at Mike. He was completely pale. The voice came again. "Ethan, don't let him see you." The door opened. There was nobody in the hallway. But at the end of it, the basement door was standing open. We hadn't opened it. A cold draft moved through the house. Then the upstairs light turned on. 2:13 a.m. Mike looked at me. "That's impossible." A man's voice came from downstairs. Calm, quiet, almost familiar. "Ethan Carter." I froze. The voice continued, "You finally came back." I had never been inside this house before, so I asked the only question I could think of. "Who are you?" The voice answered, "Ask your neighbor." Mike stepped backward, because whatever was downstairs, Mike already knew its name.
We ran out of the house. Mike didn't speak until we reached my driveway. Then he finally said, "My father warned me about this."
"About what?"
"The basement.
He told me that Daniel Blackwood had discovered something beneath the house shortly before his disappearance, a hidden room. It wasn't shown on the original property records, and it wasn't supposed to exist. According to Daniel's notes, the room had been there long before the Blackwood family bought the house. Mike's father had helped Daniel investigate it. They found an old wooden door beneath the basement stairs. Daniel believed the room was connected to strange events in the house. People heard voices, objects moved, and sometimes people saw things that weren't supposed to be there. Daniel eventually stopped talking about it. Then his family disappeared. Mike and I returned to the house the following afternoon. This time, we went straight to the basement. Behind an old shelf, we found the door. It was covered in dust. A rusty chain hung across it. Mike pulled the chain away. The door opened. Beyond it was a narrow staircase leading underground. We followed it down. At the bottom was a small room. There were old photographs on the walls, newspapers, notes, and dozens of pictures of the same upstairs window. 2:13 a.m. Every photograph showed the light. Then I noticed something. Some of the photographs showed people standing inside the window. Different people, different years, but always the same window. Mike found an old tape recorder on a table. A cassette was still inside. The label read, October 13th, 1996, 2:13 a.m. He pressed play. Daniel Blackwood's voice filled the room. If you're hearing this, my family is already gone. His voice was shaking. I thought the house was haunted. I was wrong. A pause. Then, the thing inside this house doesn't want to hurt people. Mike looked at me. Daniel continued. It wants someone to open the door. The tape crackled. Every night at 2:13, the upstairs light turns on. That's when the door opens. I asked Mike, "What door?" He didn't answer. The recording continued. I found the original room beneath the house. There's a mirror inside. My eyes moved across the room. There was a large wooden frame against the far wall, but it was covered by an old sheet. Daniel's voice became quieter. The mirror doesn't show your reflection. A long pause. It shows someone else. Then the tape stopped. Neither of us moved. Mike slowly pulled the sheet away. A huge antique mirror stood behind it. The glass was almost completely black. I stepped closer. At first, I saw nothing. Then the surface changed. I saw my own living room, my house, my bedroom, and me standing beside the window. But there was someone behind me. I turned around. Nothing. I looked back at the mirror. The figure was closer. Then I recognized him. Daniel Blackwood. He looked exactly like the photograph from 1996. His lips moved. I couldn't hear him. Then he raised his hand and pointed behind me. A little girl appeared beside him. Emily. She placed her hand against the glass. Her mouth formed two words. Close it. The lights went out. Something moved behind us. Mike grabbed my arm. Don't turn around. We heard footsteps. One step, then another. Someone was walking toward us. A man's voice whispered, Ethan. The voice came from directly behind my ear. You shouldn't have found this. I turned. Nobody was there. But the mirror had changed again. Now it showed the Blackwood house, and standing in the upstairs window was me. The light switched on. 2:13 a.m. The mirror cracked, and from somewhere inside the glass, we heard Emily scream.
We ran upstairs. The entire house seemed different now. The walls looked darker, the hallway seemed longer, and every clock inside the house had stopped at 2:13. Mike found an old box hidden beneath the stairs. Inside was Daniel's final journal. The last entry was dated October 13th, 1996. Daniel had written that the mirror didn't trap ghosts. It trapped memories. Every person who disappeared inside the house became part of it. But there was one way to stop it. Someone outside had to close the door before 2:13. Not the front door, the door beneath the house, the one leading to the mirror. Mike looked at the clock. 2:11 a.m. We had 2 minutes. We rushed downstairs. The mirror was no longer covered. Emily was standing inside it. Behind her were dozens of people, all of them staring at us. Daniel stood at the back. He pointed toward the mirror. Then he pointed toward the door. We understood. The mirror wanted to be opened. It wanted someone to step through. A voice came from the glass. My voice. "Ethan, come closer." I stopped. Mike shouted, "Don't listen!" The voice changed. Now it sounded like my mother, then my father, then Mike. Every voice I trusted. They all told me the same thing. Open the door. The clock changed. 2:12. Mike grabbed the old metal latch. The mirror began to shake. Cracks spread across the glass. Emily pressed both hands against it. She looked terrified. Then she mouthed one word. Now. The clock changed. 2:13. The upstairs light came on. The entire house shook. Mike slammed the basement door shut. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the mirror went completely dark. The voices stopped, the shaking stopped, and the upstairs light disappeared. For the first time in 20 years, the Blackwood house was completely dark. Police arrived the next morning. They searched the property. They found the hidden room, but the mirror was gone. There was nothing left except an empty wooden frame. The official explanation was that the Blackwood family had disappeared under unknown circumstances. The house was eventually boarded up. A few months later, I moved away from Ashwood. I tried to forget everything. For a while, I succeeded. Until one night, almost a year later, I was living in another state, another city, another apartment. At 2:13 a.m., I woke up for no reason. My bedroom was dark. I walked to the window. Across the street stood an old house. I'd never noticed it before. One upstairs window was glowing. I stared at it. A figure stood behind the curtain. A little girl. Emily. My phone vibrated. One message. No number, no name. Just a sentence. You closed the door. Another message appeared. But you never destroyed the mirror. I looked back at the window. The curtain slowly moved. Someone else was standing behind Emily. A tall man. Daniel Blackwood. He raised his hand and pointed toward my apartment. Then every light in my building went out, except mine. My bedroom light turned on by itself,
and in the darkness of the window, I saw my reflection. But it wasn't copying me. It slowly smiled. Then it whispered something I could barely hear. 2:13 was never the time the house woke up. The reflection leaned closer to the glass. It was the time the house remembered who was next. The light went out, and somewhere across the street, an upstairs window opened. The story of the Blackwood house was never really about a haunted house. It was about a door that could appear anywhere. And if the rumors are true, somewhere in America, there is still a house where the upstairs light turns on at exactly 2:13 a.m. and someone is always standing behind the window, waiting for the next person to look back. The end.